Welcome back one more time. In the previous lecture, we saw how we can utilize position component. And one thing, that position component does not need to be a rectangle all the time. Position component could be a rectangle, even a circle, even a pentagon or a hexagon or a triangle. But if we really want to show a rectangle on the screen, then perhaps position component would not be the right choice. To show a rectangle of any size, there is a specialized component called rectangle component that only draws a rectangle on the screen. And the main difference between position component and rectangle component is, for position component, we have to draw the rectangle by ourselves by overriding the render method. But if we had used the rectangle component, then we would not have to use this or override this render method or draw the rectangle by ourselves. So let me show you an example of rectangle component. So I'm going to create another component under my components directory. So I'm going to create a new Dart file and let me name it as my rectangle component. And that will be a class, my rectangle component. And this time we will extend the rectangle component just like that. Okay. And also, just like my position component, we can override the onload method. We can specify the position, the size, anchor, angle, scale, etc. and etc. But this time I'm going to provide all these values in a different way through the constructor parameters. So in this my rectangle component, I'm going to define the constructor first, my rectangle component, and inside or as a parameter list or constructor parameter list, I am going to provide some required named parameters. So first of all, I'm going to say required, and I'm going to say super dot like position. That means whenever I create an object of this my rectangle component, I have to provide a position, a vector2 object specifying the x coordinate and y coordinate, or x value or y value, and that position will be passed to the super. That means this parent component, and this position will be saved to the parent component. So just like this position, we can also pass the size, for example. So let's say required super dot size, and you can specify or you can pass different attributes like position, size, anchor, angle through the constructor parameters if you want. But I think I should only pass the position and size when we create an object of my rectangle component, and other parameters like the anchor, the angle, then we can specify those attributes inside the onload method. Or what we can do is, after this primary constructor, there's a bracket, we can put a colon, and then we can call super constructor. Now this one is the super constructor, and here I am specifying that the anchor should be the center, or anchor dot center. Then also we can specify some color, like provide the paint object. In position component, we don't have a paint object or paint attribute by default. So in a position component, we have position, size, anchor, scale, and angle. We don't have any predefined paint attributes, but we have for a rectangle component. Okay. And if we don't specify anything like the color, then the default color will be white. Okay. So this is my rectangle component. I'm not going to override onload method right now. And I'm going to now add this my rectangle component to my game. So in my flame game.dart file, after we have added this my position component, now I'm going to add our newly created my rectangle component. Now we have to specify the position where we want to put this my rectangle component on the screen. Let's say we want to position my rectangle component at the absolute center of this entire screen. And we know the size of this game screen by the size property inside the game class. So what I can do is we can say the position would be size by 2. That means it will divide the x value by 2 and the y value of 2. That means the absolute center. And the size would be the component size would be something like vector 2.all. So I want the x value and y value to be equal. That's why I am using this constructor all, and let's say it is like 50. And after that, if I now hit the restart button and see on the screen, then you will see that we are looking at a rectangle component at the center of the entire screen. And the anchor point of this rectangle component is center, and the component is positioned based on the anchor point. At this point, we can actually remove this debug mode, or we can simply return false from the debug mode function inside our mygame.dart file. We can simply say false because we don't need this, because now our components are visible. So this is now our rectangle. So as you can see, we didn't specify any paint object, and we didn't override the render function inside our myRectangle component, because myRectangle component or rectangle component actually does that by itself. We don't have to provide the paint. We don't have to render by ourselves. But anytime we can draw something on the rectangle, or we can paint with different color. For example, let me override the onload method one more time. So onload, and it is not necessary that we always want to or need to override the onload method and provide some value for the other attributes like anchor or paint. We can do so in the super constructor. Okay. So now inside onload, I'm going to specify, I will have an attribute called paint. Now this time I'm saying paint, and I need to import the material.dart, or maybe I should import it manually. So material.dart, and maybe the color should be like gray color, I guess. And now if I hit enter, then you will see the box or rectangle is now color gray. I can barely see this. Let's put a different color like deep purple. Okay. Like I told you that whenever we need a rectangle or a square shape of any size on the screen, so instead of using the position component, we can use the rectangle component. And just like rectangle component, there is another component called circle component. If we really want to put a circle on the screen, so we have the circle component. I'm not going to show you right now how we can use circle component, but I can make you sure that at some point we need this circle component at some point. So I will show you then.